Hey guys, and welcome back to the Way UK podcast. My name is Jesse, and I'm joined with the wonderful two,
Xenia.
Xenia,
And Michelle.
Michelle. I don't know why I decided to do that voice, but
Yeah, what was that?
yeah, I don't know.
Jesse.
We're going to move on.
Yeah.
Guys, we're going to be looking at Ruth 3 and 4 today. It's the final two chapters of the book, so welcome. Why don't we just jump in? I mean, that's what Bible study is for, right? We can start reading away. Maybe let's read from 1 to 2. Let's just read the first 2 verses.
Nice.
Anyone want to start? Zen, Shell?
I can start.
Go in.
I love to read. The Bible says, one day Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, it's time that I found a permanent home for you so that you will be provided for. Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting you gather grain with his young women. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor." Try say threshing floor 5 times. That's
Threshing floor.
That's actually quite tough.
speaking in tongues at this point.
Shabba
Shabba.
We spend too much time together.
We do.
That's
Anyway.
Yeah, interesting. So Naomi's kind of instructing Ruth to make herself a little bit available, saying it's time for you to find a permanent home, time for you to find a resting place. I guess. Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say if they haven't watched the first episode, the context behind it is that Ruth. Is it Ruth? It is Ruth. Naomi's husband and Ruth's husband, both of them have died.
Yes.
And then now they're widows. Hence why Naomi's like, my daughter, you need to go find yourself another husband.
And it's kind of been a period of mourning, hasn't it? She's kind of been just working, head down, moved country or city, one of those two. She went from being in Moab to moving to Israel.
Yeah.
And adopting a new God, adopting new cultures, new people.
Right.
It's been a lot of transition and probably not much time to think about a man in the picture, particularly because she's grieving because her husband died. She's a widow. But we've reached a stage where Naomi's encouraging Ruth. Oh, maybe it's time. We need people like that. I need a mother like Naomi to be like, oh, maybe it's time, Jesse. Well, maybe not yet. It's not time. But like, no, but it's true. We do need mothers in our life to encourage us sometimes, encourage us to step out. Mothered. Should we begin to read what happens afterwards? So going back 2 to 5.
Oh, is it me?
Yeah,
Sorry.
maybe. I don't know.
Is that why don't we read?
Cricket.
I didn't give it to anyone.
Okay, I will read verses 3 to 5 because I read verse 2. It says, "Now do as I tell you." This is Naomi still talking. "Now do as I tell you. Take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor, but don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice where he lies down. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do." "I will do everything you say," Ruth replied.
Wow. Making herself. She is getting pretty. She's getting a dress on. She's getting lovely, smelly.
What?
She's wearing perfume and stuff.
Yeah.
Like she's getting ready, bro.
But she's also so loyal to Naomi.
Yeah, go on.
Like she's just like, I will do everything you say. Dang, girl.
But I also love that this detail is left in there. Like I feel like this didn't actually need to be written down, but the fact that it is is pretty cool. Like this isn't necessarily a story where, and Jesus says this and God's, he comes down on a horse and chariot and he's like in the middle of it. It's very much just normal people going about life, grieving, and God is in every single detail. Like this kind of reminded me of the Book of Esther in the Old Testament and how Esther, she gets like dressed up to go and present herself to the king in order to win favor. So you could read that and think, oh, she's getting dressed, she's doing the most. No, I think she's doing what any girl would do if they're going on a date. You would dress nice and put your best foot forward. and God cares about those details. So I think that's really cool.
Girls, making herself available, which is kind of what she's doing. She's presenting herself, getting ready in church. How do you think you do it, and how do you think we should do it? Relationships, getting ready for relationships, making yourself available as men. How do we, I don't know, step into pursuit better, all that kind of thing? Have you got any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think making yourself available is just you living your life, like living in the fullness of who God's created you to be, not being shy, like actually stepping out and being bold. And that can look like many things. That could be you just doing your 9 to 5 and doing that well. That could be you serving in church. That could be you leading a Bible study, or just whatever that looks like. You just stepping into what you're doing and doing it well, and allowing that to shine. Like God will shine in you.
Yeah.
And I think it's less about like being extroverted and being loud and like doing all the things and being busy. I don't think that's what Ruth was doing by making herself available. I think she was like, this is where Boaz is going to be, so I'm just going to make myself visible. I'm just going to be here.
Totally.
And just do what I can do.
Exactly.
And I think that's all you can really do. Really.
Yeah.
What do you think, Shelley?
Shelley. I was sort of thinking the same. Like, fix your eyes on Jesus. It sounds so cringe to say that, but like, be completely enamored by him, like in awe of him, and like do what you feel like he's telling you to do on your heart. Serve on a team, like do your work, like spend time with the Lord, be at church on Sunday. You're there. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be at the front on the stage to be available. Hi guys, I'm here. Like, just be doing you. Love the Lord. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And how do you know you're ready?
I don't think you're ever ready, like fully ready for it to come around. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I agree. I think when you notice what God is doing, I guess then you're ready. That's what I think. I think, yeah, God will present people to you in different seasons and different times. And sometimes it's the right season, sometimes it's not. But I think you'll know. Like, everyone says it, like, you just know when it's the right person. You know when it's the right time. So, yeah.
What about you, Jesse?
Yeah.
What about me?
Spin it.
What kind of thing? What do you want to know?
How do you know when you're ready to pursue?
When I'm ready, constant communication with God. Like, I know there's always going to be room for growth, forever and always, until we're 80, until we're 90, until we enter heaven.
Yeah.
We're always going to be improving, always going to be growing, not specifically improving, but like always going to be going through a process with God. And, you know, there's different stages that people enter relationships. Some go through a lot of those processes on their own and then they find a partner. Some people find a partner earlier on and then they go through the processes together. And I guess it's kind of, I don't know, there's no sort of linear route. There's no set time for anyone.
So real.
I'd much rather wait for the right person and get married when I'm 40 than get married super young when I'm like 21 and then suddenly it turns out it's not as fruitful as it could have been, and I kind of jumped into it and I kind of thought I was in love, and then was I? Like, I don't know. I'd much rather just let God be God and trust him.
It's good.
And there has, like, I've been on dates this year. I can say it. What was those smoke?
She said that's tea.
Me and Shelley didn't go on a date. That's what.
That would be
that's the vibes you
tea.
gave from that smoke.
That's the tea.
But I don't often. I'm not actively pursuing it. There's just been a few people who I've been like wowed by. I've been like, oh my gosh, is this a thing? Oh God, are you here? Yeah, I feel you a bit. Let's give this a go. And then neither of them like turned into a relationship, but they both turned into friendship, and it's been awesome. And so I don't know. It's just kind of like it's being in communication with God and also with mentors, having older figures like Naomi who can speak into your life and be hang on a minute, like, this is a good idea for you. This is your time for you. And also in this kind of like day and age, this culture, is really important to continue your family line. Like the generational thing was very key. You read it throughout the Bible, like generational. And later we find out why Ruth's family heritage was actually really important, because it gave birth to, well, we'll get there.
Ooh,
but
spoiler.
there's a cool facts later about Ruth's genealogy.
Yeah.
But so there was actually also a bit of a time pressure with Ruth, because she was a widow with no kids, and there was this need to continue the family line.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, she kind of was quick to make herself available. I think there was only a 6-month gap between her husband passing and then her making herself available again, which isn't very long. But also, she was late.
She moved on quick.
She was moved on quick.
I
But
don't
she
even
was
think that.
she was growing old,
No
and she
way.
needed kids.
Yeah.
And that stops working at some point.
But
So,
she's also willing. Like, she didn't have to. She didn't have to go to Israel. She could have stayed in Moab with her people, like where she was ethnically from. And like, if you were watching the last episode, we talked about how Moab was like an enemy territory to Israel. So they were outsiders. Like, they did not chill together. But that speaks to her character, because she chose to serve her mother-in-law, not even her real mum. Her real mum was in Moab, and she chose to serve her mother-in-law, you know? So I think it just speaks to her character. Like, she didn't have to, but she was willing.
Totally.
yeah.
Loyalty.
Her character was ready. Next section I've labeled, basically, me and the team, we have like briefs for anyone watching. And we just kind of like talk about it earlier in the week and talk about the scriptures. Usually Zen writes them, but this week I write them, which means I've given all of them labels, and it's great.
And tell them what you labeled this
Next
section.
one is called "Is This Love That I'm Feeling?" Quote Bob Marley.
Do you want to sing
Is
for
this love? Is this love? Is this love? Is this love that I'm feeling?
Beautiful.
Down, 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 down. You don't know the note. I wanna know. Do you want to read 6 to 9?
Tell me you're a musician without telling me you're a musician.
Sorry, I'm a little hyper. I had 8 hours of sleep last night.
Praise
Can you
God.
believe it?
Praise God.
This is what it's like to be fully alive and to listen to the health
Of your
ideas.
body.
I know, this is great.
Nuts.
I feel ready.
Okay, the next part, we're going from verses 6 to 9. It says, "So she went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. 'Who are you?' he asked. 'I am your servant Ruth,' she replied. 'Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer.'"
A little context around like guardian redeemer, family redeemer. Back then, the Israelites, because they were a small people group, it was like a cultural practice where the man, like a relative, would take the widowed wife person and the land to protect the family and take the name almost. Because they were such a small people group, they needed to almost grow. So by like marrying the widow and your like cousin or relative, you're like still keeping your name. Which was just like a practical thing, and like it made sense. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, well, it was this thing called I don't know how to pronounce it. Let's call it like a gil. It's like it's Geol, like a jewel, a ghoul, or however you say it. And yeah, you're right. It was a practice back in this day and age, where when someone died and was widowed without offspring, then another relative would almost step in and be like, "No, guys, don't worry, I got this," and take a bit of responsibility and marry the widow in order to maintain the offspring, because heritage, genealogy was super important back then. As you said, like a small people group, they're key on keeping a family name, key on building this community, building
and their land as well.
This land, and keeping the land running through the family rather than just a random person buying it and moving on. So yeah, it seems a bit funny because it's not very normal nowadays, but it's actually quite beautiful. It's like a relative saying, no, I'll help this situation, because a widow often will end up in poverty as well,
right?
When there's not like a husband or a man to kind of provide in that day and age, which is also very different to how it is now.
Yeah.
But often that would lead to poverty. The widow might have to sell the land. The widow might have this or that, and so therefore, it's this kind of cool redemption story of someone stepping in, taking a bit of responsibility, which is pretty cool.
I think we should actually set the scene a bit, because this passage of scripture just sounds mad. Like, this guy is sleeping in the field, then some girl just comes to him, then he's like, hey, what's going on? Like, who's this girl? Like, there's just a lot going on. So I think we should lay some context. So let's set the scene. Imagine like Boaz, he's just, had a meal, had a drink. Now he's gone out into the field where all his grain is. So like, this is his livelihood. And this is also other people's livelihood as well. Like the grain that they're harvesting. Yeah, people need money, people need to work.
And they need to protect it.
Yeah, and also during this time. So the Book of Ruth is kind of set in the period of the Judges, which if you read in the Old Testament, it's basically just a period where like different people ruled over Israel, but like the people of God had just walked away from him. So people were like falling into sin, falling into temptation, stealing, like doing a lot. So there would be a lot of thieves that would like scout the fields in the nighttime to see how much grain they could take, for themselves. And so that's why Boaz is out there, because he wants to guard his grain and also for the people that are working there. So he's out there on the field, he's sleeping, keeping watch. And then Ruth comes and he's like, who are you? Probably because it's like really dark at night. It's like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Like imagine someone creeping in on your house at 2 a.m. You're like, who is this person? So I think just putting some context as to where Boaz is at, so it just makes a bit more sense. But then also when Ruth says, I'm your servant, spread the corner of your covering over me, that might sound a bit like, what the heck is going on? Why is she saying that? And I think in those days, like the spreading of the covering, like a man covering over a woman, would kind of be a symbol of like him taking her as his wife, taking her as his own. But obviously at this point, spoiler, they're not married yet. So you could consider this moving a bit too fast. But I think it was symbolic of like Boaz actually choosing to step into that kinsman redeemer role, and like Ruth actually choosing to do this, like to be the one to restore her family as well.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about it.
Yeah, no, it's nuts.
You wake up with a woman on your feet.
It's like, what does that mean?
Freaked out
at 2 a.m. in a pitch black field.
Fair play to Ruth. Is that what it means to be available? Like,
I was literally gonna say that. Like, she made herself physically available.
Is that what you're gonna?
Definitely
do
not.
To a man?
Definitely not.
No,
definitely
sneak
not
into his house.
Definitely not in 2024.
Tickle his feet until he wakes up.
Definitely
not the tickle the feet. But to be fair, right, if you think about it, the threshing floor back then was like you said, there are a lot of people sort of sneaking about trying to like steal or whatever. So hence why Boaz was like sleeping in the field. It made it a dangerous place, and usually women wouldn't be there. Like the people who were like the women who were sort of like behind the harvesters collecting the leftover grain, they would be in the house, like safe. But then she was like, oh no, I'm actually gonna not be safe and step out and tell Boaz, make Boaz available, like show Boaz that I'm available, uncover his feet. I sort of think it's funny that that's even mentioned. It's like she's almost like trying to wake him up on purpose, like uncovering his feet, making him cold. So he's like, oh.
Yeah, I'd be cold if my feet were uncovered. That would wake me up. Honestly, the cold air.
And it's also really interesting, like the uncovering of the feet. Some people think it's like an innuendo of them actually like sleeping together. But again, I would encourage everyone to go and do their own research. Because I think there's like two different sides of like where people lean towards, whether they actually did sleep together, whether that was just like, Ruth trying to get Boaz's attention. Yeah. Either one. But please do your own research.
Yeah, there's loads of nuance in the Bible, isn't there? There's always lots of different ways that we can learn different things and different lessons, because it's just like it's like this ever active, ever cool thing that we get to read about. Which in this case is, did Ruth sleep with Boaz? Which is actually quite,
right.
It doesn't really matter too much. Well, actually, no, it does matter. But there are other scenarios where there's nuance, where actually you can get total different messages in, and it can change your life. So it's worth looking into when there is like this kind of weird tension.
Yeah. Should we
move on? Should we go to... We're still in chapter 3. Oh my gosh, feels like we've been here for...
We're on our way.
4 years.
We're on our way.
10 to 13?
Do you know what? Let's just go full.
Straight through.
10 to
18.
chapter 4.
Yeah.
What, just read to the end of chapter 3?
Read to the end of chapter 3.
Okay. Do you want me to?
Do you want to? I can do it as well.
I can also do it.
I haven't done it yet. Charles, do you want to?
You can take it.
I haven't got to read any yet. Let me.
Go on, read it then, mate.
Well, I'll start reading. It says this. The Lord bless you, my daughter, Boaz exclaimed. You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before, for you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now, don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows that you're a virtuous woman. But while it's true that I am one of your family redeemers, there is another man who is more closely related to you than I am. Stay here tonight, and in the morning I'll talk to him. If he is willing to redeem you, very well, let him marry you. But if he is not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Now lie here until morning. Yeah, maybe let's just stop there for a sec. There's another guy in the picture.
Oh.
Isn't there?
Character.
Which is also interesting because Ruth is looking for a family redeemer. Yeah. But has gone to, I don't know, not the direct family redeemer or the closest family redeemer. Mm. I don't know. Maybe Ruth didn't know. Maybe Naomi. Maybe it was familiarity because
Naomi
knew Boaz. Naomi mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just an interesting point.
Right.
I wonder if she knew or not. But it is interesting because there's now another man in the picture.
Dun, dun, dun.
Hey, yo, drama. Set the scene. Chapter 4. Yeah. Zen, do you want to read from Ruth, verse 14 to 18?
So Ruth lay at Boaz's feet until the morning, but she got up before it was light enough for people to recognize each other. For Boaz had said, no one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor. Then Boaz said to her, bring your cloak and spread it out. He measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to the town. When Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, what happened, my daughter? Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her. And she said, he gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said to her, just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today.
Mm.
I just think that speaks to both of their characters.
Yeah.
To be honest, like the part that you read before, Boaz said,
virtuous.
Yeah, he said that, people know you as like a virtuous woman. Yeah. Like Ruth's character really spoke before her.
Yeah.
But also Boaz's character as the Redeemer wasn't just a title, but he lived it out. Like he gave her abundant foods to bring back, not just for her, but for her mother-in-law as well.
Provided.
He provided big time. And I think, I think that just speaks so much, but also to just a separate point as well, like Ruth's character as well. I don't think she expected Boaz to step up in that way and do the most for her and give her 6 scoops of barley. Yeah. It's a lot of food. I don't think she was felt entitled. I think she was actually very humbled. I don't think she assumed that, because you're probably going to be the one to redeem me, then you might as well. I think she was very humble in her approach, which I think is beautiful.
I think it also is testament of Boaz's character, where Boaz was like, no, there's actually another kinsman redeemer before me. And it just shows how noble he is, where he's like, oh no, I want to do it right. Mm-hmm. There's someone actually before me. Let's talk to him first.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's funny. You can also maybe this is a bit of a stretch of a point, but see Jesus in Boaz as well, and almost see us a little bit as Ruth. Because once we were in relationship with God, and then sin came, death came, and we were separated from God. And in order for us to be back in right relationship, in order for our almost family line, our heritage, our goodness, in order for the fullness to be fulfilled, we had to have someone come and redeem us. We had to have a redeemer, a great redeemer. And I know it's not specifically a direct metaphor, but I love to imagine almost the picture of Boaz putting his cloak and covering Ruth and like being like, no, you're mine, I redeem you. I sometimes imagine that being Jesus in us. Jesus being like, no, I redeem you. I'll cover you. I'll take care of you. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to die on a cross for you. Which I just kind of had a little bit of a revelation on as I was reading this morning. I was like, oh man, Boaz is like stepping up like Jesus stepped up for us. And he like claimed us as ours. Like we were bought with a price. That's how it describes us as in the New Testament. Like Jesus bought us. Not so that he could like own us and direct us and we were in slavery, but actually so that he could invite us under his covering, under his garment, under his wing. And yeah, so I just found that pretty beautiful. Bit of a side point. But also back to the when is it right conversation. When is it right to get into a relationship? Ruth was known as a virtuous woman, and it had described her as working hard for the past couple months. Like, she had really good character, and Boaz had really good character. In Ruth chapter 1 and 2, it described him as a man with integrity. It described him as a good man. And so you kind of go, oh, actually, these guys are good. That's why they can like crack on.
Totally.
They're not dealing with loads and loads of insecurity or anything, or it doesn't write that at least. No, it just says that they're virtuous and they have integrity. So of course they're going to crack on. Also, another side point, 6 scoops of barley. Is that the new chocolate?
Wait, what?
New chocolate
and flowers.
Like, if I
Oh,
want to make a
okay,
woman known, do I just be like, hey girl,
let me give
here's
you
6 scoops?
She'll look at that and be like,
Imagine-
what is this?
So if she's a godly woman, she'll be like, Ruth, and I'll be like, Boaz.
That's a sign. You're the redeemer.
Imagine that. Imagine I actually like brought a girl 6 scoops of barley.
Hey, it'll
See
show
it,
her
test if she
character.
knows
Where would you
the
She knows the
Bible.
Bible.
where would you even get 6 scoops of barley from in 2024?
I don't know.
Sainsbury's.
Tesco's.
Just any shop.
Any final points before we move on to chapter 4?
The point that you made before, I'm gonna reference it in this next section about Jesus, because I think that's really cool.
Ooh.
What you were talking about, but let's get to it and then we'll find out.
Finishing each other's sentences.
Shirley, do you want to do the reading? 2 to 10?
Nice.
Sorry. Was it 4?
2 to 10.
Or like 1, I don't know.
1 to 10.
Yeah.
Awesome. Boaz marries Ruth.
Hey.
Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he said. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's wife, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses.
Dude, that was a hectic amount of scripture,
well done,
but it was very cool.
Thank you.
Guys, any first points? You said you had a point. Go on, bring it
in. Let me bring this point.
All right, hang on.
Let her
Everyone
cook.
get ready.
Guys, she's about to cook.
She's about to bring a point.
Don't even.
All right, I'm ready for
Don't
it.
even.
We're ready.
Bring the fire.
The only point I have is that this, first of all, we don't even know this other guy's name. I'm just going to put that out there. And maybe there's a reason, because he wasn't good enough, okay? It's giving unlocked character.
No,
that's exactly what he is. He is just an unlocked character, because Boaz came up to him and said, okay, like, I just want to do things properly. Like, I know you're probably the next person in line to, like, you know, step up. And he said, okay, cool, I will. And then Boaz is like, oh, actually, the only other thing is that, you know, you're going to have to marry Ruth and also have children with her in order to maintain the family name. And then the guy's like, I don't know if I can do that. Which to me just shows that it just wasn't unconditional love. Like, it wasn't sacrificial love. And in those days, like, as the kinsman redeemer, you would take on that responsibility to raise those children, to share your inheritance with them as well, like to take over that land. And maybe the cost was too much for him. Maybe the cost to redeem Ruth was too much. But I love what you said about how this story kind of shadows to Jesus in the fact that Jesus redeemed us, and that had a cost as well. Like, it costed him his life. But Jesus looks at us and he's like, no, the cost is actually worth it.
Totally.
Just for you. Whereas with this unlocked character with no name, we don't know who he is, the cost was too big for him, which shows that he didn't have that sacrificial love that Jesus has.
He wasn't willing.
He wasn't willing, which makes Jesus more awesome than this unlocked character, because Jesus actually cares about us. That's right. He cared so much that he said that I'm going to forsake my comforts. Like in Philippians 2, it says he didn't consider equality with God as something to cling to, except he came down and humbled himself in the position of a servant, you know. I just love the shadow to Jesus. And it also shows that, like, I guess in a more lighthearted sense, like with relationships and stuff, like the right one will see your worth. Like, you don't have to, you know, try and make yourself look the best you can, or like try and convince somebody to love you, because if you convince somebody to get with you, you're gonna have to convince them to stay with you as well. Whereas with this, with Boaz, he saw her worth from the beginning. He said that you're virtuous, you know, your character speaks highly. She didn't have to strive. She didn't really have to do all that. He saw her for who she was.
Yes.
So there's that as well. Bit of wisdom for you.
Cooked.
And what's crazy about that is, I don't know about you, but I'm very, very similar to my mum.
You also look identical as well.
Yeah, you do.
I look identical.
You don't
to
look
your mum.
You're saying I look like a girl. You're saying my mum looks like a boy.
Jesse's mum, I did not say that. I did not say that.
But me and mum are super similar. And I'm very similar to my dad as well. I'm this cool blend of all of them.
The cool blend.
Cool
yeah,
blend,
not the uncool blend.
You know. What?
Not the uncool blend, but the cool blend.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, of course.
I thought you were the uncle.
That's a violation, but we'll just move on.
I'm going to move on. It's funny how in family you often turn out like your genealogy, like your parents, like your grandparents. Me and my granddad are similar in other ways. Me and my grandma are similar in other ways. I'm sure if I met my great-great-great-granddad, I'd probably be quite similar to him. Maybe. I don't know. Who knows? But the point is, characteristics can kind of drop down within family. You hear a lot of that, like generational blessing, generational stuff. And just this next section, I'm going to read verse 13 and verse 17.
Right.
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. And then verse 17 says, the woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. And Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. And we know that Jesus is in the genealogy of David. And so similar, not only is Boaz like reflecting Christ, he's a part of Christ's genealogy.
So good.
He's a part of the heritage. So of course they're going to look quite similar. Similar to, same how like I'm similar to my mum. Maybe like Jesus, his character was similar to Boaz's because Boaz knew God. Jesus was God, but also in the family line. I don't know. It's just quite cool.
And it just like on that, I think it's so awesome. Also, I just wanted to acknowledge that we missed verses 11 to 12, but it was basically the elders just giving permission, being like, oh yeah, we were witnesses. But anyways, I was going to say, I think this whole story is so awesome. Like, obviously there isn't like explicitly saying God was in this, but it just goes to show how God's plans through humans, choices, can still be good. And like, Naomi's story was devastating. She probably was like grieving to the core, like, my gosh, where is God in this? Because I'm a widow. My daughter-in-law is also a widow. Both my sons have died. And like, where is God in this? But then God comes around and redeems her story through Ruth's loyalty and Boaz's like also loyalty and his character, both of them coming together and then now having a child. Like their family lineage is like continuing on to then Jesus, which is so cool. And like God has just redeemed that whole story. I just love that.
The thing that I love the most about this story is the fact that obviously we get to the part where Jesus is born and he comes from David's line, but also David's like grandmother, I think, is Ruth, the Moabite, not the Israelite, the Moabite. And that's such a key detail because the Moabites and the Israelites were like enemies. They were not cool at all. So for Jesus, you know, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, like he could have been born from an entirely Israelite line, but he didn't choose to do that, which shows that like God doesn't care about, you know, like politics. He doesn't care about like keeping peace. He doesn't care about like all of this stuff. Like if he wants to move,
God
he will.
God doesn't care about keeping peace.
Not that. No, I didn't mean it like that. I meant like he doesn't care about like abiding by social norms or like what we think is correct.
Yeah.
If God wants to move, he will. If God wants to love, he will. If God wants to redeem, he will, and he won't stop at anything. And I love that. And I also think like for Naomi, who left Israel to move to Moab because Israel was in a famine, and this was supposed to be like God's chosen people, God's holy people. She left her country, God's chosen people, and the people around her could have been like, why did you leave? You've abandoned us.
Totally.
And then she comes back from Moab to Israel and the people are like, why are you here? You know, like, why are you back? Who are these people you brought with you? Like, she had every reason in a way for God to not redeem her because she had left him. She had walked away from the promised land. She'd walked away from her people. But God was like, no. You might have walked away from me, but I've never walked away from you.
So good.
And I think for us listening and reading the story, like maybe you're sitting here in a situation where you feel like I've abandoned God, or like, oh, I've walked away. Oh, he can't redeem me. Like just because we've walked away from God doesn't mean God's going to walk away from us.
So true.
Because he's that faithful.
He is.
And that's what I love about this story.
No, it's so good. And it just matches Jesus, his genealogy.
Yep.
Matches Jesus' message, which is one of whoever, like whoever you are, no matter where you've come from, no matter what you've done, come to me.
And you're not too far gone.
Yeah.
Not too far gone.
Yeah. No, exactly that. Well, guys, is there any final points you want to make before? I feel pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us for Ruth 3 and 4. We'll be back next week with another new series of some sort. We're also posting twice a week now, which I'm sure you might have picked up on by now, but it's, you know, stay tuned because we've got some good stuff coming.
Yes.
And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.